Hey everyone, this is Daniel, and in today's video, we're going to deep dive in how to use lookup columns in Power Apps. And I'll specifically focus my attention around two data sources, which is Dataverse and SharePoint, because the Dataverse tables and the SharePoint lists are the two highly used data sources. So I want to focus my attention on that. And I'll share some tips and tricks with you where you can go ahead and even filter those lookup columns. So it's going to be a fun one. Stick around. But first, here's my intro video. So let's get started. Now I'll first focus my attention on the Dataverse table, and then we'll switch over to the SharePoint list. Now in Dataverse, I've already gone ahead and built two tables. And the way I've designed it is that the primary table, and I call that primary is because that table by itself has those primary ones such as the single line of text or a choice one or something like that, but it doesn't have any lookups, right? And then the secondary table, that is the one that has the lookups. So that way you have a really good understanding of how the two works. So when I go to my Dataverse and I click on tables, the first table is called as MFR, which stands for manufacturer. When I go to the manufacturer, you might have seen me use these in my other videos. They've got actually the primary data that I want. Also keep in mind the column types. So the primary columns I have is an ID, that's an auto number, HQ for headquarters, that's a text. I've got logo, which is another text, and then I've also got manufacturer ID, which is also another whole number. So remember, these are the primary ones. And just so that you can see it, when I go take a look at my data and I go take a look at custom columns, you can actually see the type of data that's coming through, all right? Just simple, not very fancy. Now let's take a look at the second column or the second table. So I go back to my tables, and here is where I go and see devices. So when I go my devices, the ones that I want you to focus on is things such as MFR. As the name suggests, it is for manufacturer. This manufacturer's lookup is coming from the table I just showed you. And if you actually go and take a look at it, you go to the manufacturers, you will actually see that it's a lookup and it's happening from manufacturer. Now, I want to pause and talk a little bit about how powerful Dataverse table is, because when I go and create this column, it automatically does this over here. It's called relationship name. And that relationship name is basically it's saying that, hey, it understands that there's a relationship happening, so it goes ahead and provides you a relationship name. But in the back end, it actually does something even more powerful. So let's go and take a look at that really quick. I go on cancel, and I go take a look at relationships. In the relationships, you will see that relationship that we just talked about, all right? But as you can see now over here, we are looking at this from the devices perspective. Okay, we are in the devices table. What it is saying is that in this device table, there are multiple items tied to every one manufacturer. Therefore, it is called as many to one. And the example is if I come over to go to my data, you'll actually see some examples. Like I have multiple HP manufactured devices. And so there's many over here, but there's only one manufacturer, which is HP. So does that kind of make sense why this relationship is that way? That we're looking at from the devices standpoint, and over here it is saying it's many to one. So let's go and flip that switch a little bit. If I go and take a look at tables, and now if I go to the original manufacturer one, it automatically also has that relationships. It went ahead and created that relationships. But if you see the difference over here, its relationship with device is one to many. It's kind of the opposite, which makes sense, right? Because we're looking at this relationship from the MFR perspective, from the manufacturer's perspective. And there's always only one unique manufacturer. And just like I had shown you, there's one unique one, right? All of these ones that we see, which I scroll over here, are Acer's, Dell, Microsoft, all of these are all unique. So every one manufacturer here has a many relationship to the devices one. So kind of do you understand this? Because it's one of the things, if you understand this and get a grasp that knowledge, you understand the power of how Dataverse works, is that it builds those relationships automatically in such scenarios, and then you're able to do some nice lookups with that, right? Now, let's go and build a very simple table, because that's the one we're going to use to save some data, which is going to be like a request. And then there, when we are saving it using the edit form, we're going to go and do some magic with that lookup. So what I'll do is I'll come back to my tables, and on this new table, I'll put in something called as request. Okay, so I'll call that as request, and it automatically give me a plural, which is fine. And I'll call this one, the initial one, as title, and that is it, T-I-T-L-E, and I'll go and create that. And while it's doing that, it automatically goes ahead and creates a whole bunch of other columns, which is fine. In addition to the title, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more columns. I'm going to add 2 lookups over here, right? So the first lookup is going to be for the MFR. It goes to be manufacturer. And that manufacturer, I'm going to do a lookup to that primary manufacturer table that we saw. So I'm going to do a lookup over there. And then the related one, I'm going to go ahead and search for that lookup. So actually, I'm going to go search for that manufacturer. I'm going to scroll, and there you go. We found the manufacturer, selected it. From here on, you don't have to go and pick the other columns that are tied to it. You just select the table and it does the rest for you, right? So I'll go and click on done. The other one that I want to go and do is now the device. So I'll go and select device. So I'll click on device. Here on the data type, I'm going to go and do lookup. And in the lookup, I'm going to find the related table. And my related table in this case was called as devices. So I got to go and scroll down. Yep, that's what it is, devices, and leave everything else as is. And I'll click on done, and I'll click on save table. And now we're done with building our new table for the Dataverse, where we're going to save the data. So now that the saving of the table is happening, we'll go into Power Apps and we'll just come up with a very simple example of how I'm going to create a form to save the data, to look at the data, and do the magic of the lookup. So here we are, the table is already created. I'm going to go to my apps. And what I did was I already went ahead and created a very simple shell app. I call it shell because all it has is the design. It's got nothing else in it. I had put no formulas whatsoever. It's just a very blank one. But I just went ahead and added that to kind of speed up the process. So in the Dataverse one, that's the one we're going to use. So I'll go ahead and actually create a new blank one. In fact, I'll show you this trick that I do is I'll delete this again. I'll go ahead and just duplicate this one. So duplicate that screen. I'll rename that one to my Dataverse screen. Right? I don't need any of these icons. I can go and delete it, or you can go and hide it, however you see that. And in the main screen, I'll go ahead and change that name to my Dataverse screen. Right? So we're already done. Good, enough information to start with over here. Now let's go and connect our devices. Our data sources. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and add the data source. And I'm going to go and click on connectors. And my connectors, I'll actually do a devices. So there is the devices. In fact, let me just do one for request. All right. The request is the one that we just created. Next, I'll go ahead and now add a simple gallery. So I'll go and clear the gallery and I'll go ahead and reference that data source right there. Perfect. I'll just make sure I get it in just only some text because I really don't have any pictures. And right now it just shows this way because we don't have any data, but that's fine. And then the next thing I want to do is go ahead and add an edit form. So let me just move this up just a little bit. Cool. And I'll go ahead and add my edit form. And here it is. Here's my edit form. And in my edit form, I'll go ahead and make a connection to that table. So right now I can click on this data source, and the data source is called requests. And there you go. It's gone ahead and actually given me the default ones, but I'll go to the edit tables, and in my edit tables, I actually want to go and get those 2 more. So I can remove this created on because I don't need it. And in this add field, I need to go ahead and search for the manufacturer. I need to go search for the device, and I'll go and click add. And there you go. It's gone ahead and added 2 things. But did you see this magic that happened over here? That is the wow factor, because what happened is, remember, we had set up relationships which came out of those lookup columns. So I intentionally went ahead and only put in the request data table. But because our request has the lookups to the manufacturers and devices, Power Apps Canvas app is smart enough to know that, hey, in the edit form, Daniel referred to those 2 other data sources as well. I'll go ahead and need them. So it automatically went and made that connection. This is the one piece I really love about how smart Canvas apps is. Cool. All right, I got excited, but we'll kind of move forward. Let me just clean this up a little bit. I'll go ahead and make this as a 1 column, so we just have all this information, and we're moving along. So what I'll do is I'll just add a button because eventually I'm going to have to go and save something. So I'll leave that as is. And now let's go and do some magic over here. The magic is we've got lookups, but I want to do some filtering, and that's where the fun of the formulas actually start. First thing I got to do is I got to come to my items, and I got to go to my item itself, and I got to put in defaults. And for the defaults, it's going to be for my requests, and then I'll go ahead and close it, because if I don't do that, I will not see this form. It actually goes blank. But either way, in manufacturers, this is what we see right now, numbers. And then devices, again, numbers. So what we have to do is we've got to first click on that data card, and I got to go to this edit in the advanced properties. I got to go to the edit, and in my edit, I actually got to go ahead and pick the name of the manufacturers. And as we were looking at that Dataverse table, we know that it was in the title column. So I'm going to go ahead and reference both of them for the title column. And if I do a quick test, now it works. And one of the neat things is it's also searchable. So if I were to go ahead and just say HP, only the ones which came in, which had an HP. So remember, it's not just a first term type of search that H doesn't have to be in the first. Over here in Toshiba, H is right smack in between, and it still does that search. I like this really good search functionality that it has. All right, but now we got to go and do the same thing over here for the devices as well, because in devices we are seeing that. So I got to go back over here. I got to select the data card, and for this, remember, I don't even have to unlock it. I just got to come into the properties. I got to click on edit, and in the edit, I'll have to go ahead and pick the actual name. So in this case, it will also be title. So I go and select the title, close that, go and do a play. And there you go, it's all working. Right now, it is showing me everything. It is showing me all the HPs, all the Dells, all the Microsofts, all the devices. What I want to do is I want to do some filtering. But here's the thing, we got to do filtering. We got to filter this lookup column based on this lookup column's selection. So we're kind of almost doing like a double lookup formula. And that's the magic that I'm going to show you. So let me actually show you the formula over there. So I'm going to get out from here, and just so that you know what is going on, I'm actually going to go and drop this label so you can actually see all the action that is happening. So I'll just drop this label, and I'll go and make it a little bit bigger so you can actually see the formula and the date coming in. I mean the text coming in. But what I'm going to do is for this MFR, specifically for this manufacturer, whenever an item is selected, I want to go ahead and save that data to a temporary variable. And the reason I do that is so that I don't have to reference this control name, but I don't have to reference the data card value 3. I don't want to do that. I'd rather reference a variable. And since I'm going to use a set function, it's a global variable, I can call that across anywhere in the app. That's just a practice that I follow. So selecting on the control, the data card value, I'm going to go to the properties and I'm going to select something called as OnChange. And OnChange again is false, so we'll go and delete that. Again, important piece to notice is that when you're making this type of property change, you don't have to unlock the device. Unlock the actual device and the settings. It's one of the important things to know, that you're not messing with the form, or you're not messing with the controls of the properties. You're trying to keep it as original as possible for it to be fully functional. So here's my formula. I'm going to do is use the set function, and on the set function, I'm going to call it as varMFR, and I'll call this as the selected value. Sorry, I'm going to use the self function. Is the self right there? I'm going to call it as selected. It's right there, and I'm going to call it, reference it its name. So in this case, that control actually was called as title. So I'm going to go down, and I'm going to grab the title. Now I could use the IntelliSense as well. I can just start typing in TITLE, but I just wanted to show you which one it was, and it's right there. So as a test now, all right, well, actually I'm going to come back to my control, the variable, and over here, I'll go into the text itself and I'll change that to varMFR. So let's do a quick test. If I come down over here and I'll go and select that, it's coming up. Go and change it, it's coming up. So on change, the data is changing, just to show what is going on. Now comes the really interesting point is, we are able to go ahead and grab this information, which is out of the box. We got to go and filter this control. So for that, I do have to go ahead and unlock, and I got to add a very special formula. So I'm going to come now to this items place. So I'm going to come now to this devices, and I'm going to click on this specific control. I'll go to my advanced and I'll go ahead and unlock it. So now that it's unlocked, I can actually start doing some stuff. So what I do is my habit has always been to keep the original one as is. I just go and comment it out. That way, if I have to go and refer it again, I always have the original one. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a copy of that. So I'm just going to go and hold my shift button down. I'm going to click on end, highlighted the whole thing. I'll do a control C. And now I just hold my shift button down, hit enter, and I'm in the next line. Just thought I'll share a little bit of those with you all as well. So I'm going to go and paste it, but I'll go back to the beginning and I'm going to start typing in this filter, all right? Moment I do the filter, the open bracket comes and we are golden, so we can just move forward. Now it went ahead and already did this choices, like the choices coming in, but now I got to do this additional work to go ahead and do the filtering. And here's how you do it. I'm going to now say that from this information, from this table, I want to go and get its title column. The title was basically all the device names. I'm going to go and grab that title column, and then its title column, I'm going to say that go and search that title, and in this filtered section of all the other devices, and only go ahead and grab the ones that match this manufacturer. And the formula sometimes does look a little confusing, but that's because we're doing a lot of lookups over here. And in this case, we're going to be referencing multiple lookups. So kind of follow along with this formula because that's a very important one. So I'm going to do title in, and in that title, I'm going to say, hey, not just the title in all the devices. I want you to only get title of the devices which are filtered with this manufacturer name. And so I'm going to go and type this filter. I'm going to reference the devices one. And then in there, I'm saying as long as the manufacturer matches the one that we've selected, and the one that we've selected comes with the var right there, go ahead and get me its title. And it goes ahead and gets its title right there. And I'll close that. And granted, right now it is, delegable. It's not delegable because it's only able to pull 500. You can bump that up to 2000. But let's face it, you don't have that many devices to pull over here. In fact, the entire list is only 100. So I'll leave that, decision up to you whether this is going to be fully functional. And remember, when you see stuff like this, the delegation warning, it's not always bad. I know for my scenario, my data doesn't go over 500, so I'm good. So I'm going to keep that as is. But here's the ultimate test. I got to go and do a play. And now I did Sony. So if I go and do a Sony, these are all Sony products. If I go and change that now to say Microsoft one, these are all Microsoft products. So what we'll do is we'll actually go and save the data and we'll just see how it works. So what I'll do is for this title one, I'll also unlock it and I'll just put in some information. I'll say the user's name dot, say the email, and I'll put in now, right? So we just got some information coming in all the time. And then this one, submit, it's pretty much just a submit. So I'll do the submit, do the submit form. That's the edit form. And there you go. So now we can do a test. And in my test, I'll select the Microsoft. So I'll go and select the security, click on submit, and then we should see that information coming in. So let's go and now clean up this gallery a little bit, all right? In this case, the title is false. Not sure why this is, because it's going to be MFR.Title. And now we actually got the title over here. But what we already did in the table was we did a lookup. So we did a lookup of the manufacturer. We did the lookup of the devices. So we can actually go ahead and get more information. And here's what I'm actually telling you. We went ahead in our tables, we went ahead and created something called as the request column. So I go into the requests right here. And in the requests, we did a lookup of the manufacturer. We did a lookup of the devices, the lookups over here. And because we've done that, not only can we reference this information, but we can also get more information about the devices. Let me show you what I mean. When I come now over here, I'll move this guy down. I want to not only get the vendor name, but I want to get what's the name of the device, what's the manufacturer, what's the device type. And I can do all of that right here. So I'm going to do a Control-C, Control-V. Now watch these formulas, all right? Watch how I go ahead and do this. So the first one itself, we went ahead and referenced the manufacturer. And I just put a dot and I got the title, right? But now let's go and do some other magic. I want to go ahead and get the device type. Remember, the device type, whether it's an Ultrabook or laptop or mini, we don't have this in our original list. It's coming from that lookup. So now I can go over here and I can, in this item, I'll type in device because that's the original column, and then I'll drop in, and now it references all these other things. All I had to do was hit the period and it goes ahead and references the devices because that's a lookup that's happening. So now I can go and get all the other stuff too. I can go ahead and get tablet. I can do a Control-C, Control-V, go down over here, and I can go ahead and grab things such as, say, memory, or I think it was called RAM or CPU. I can go and get all of that stuff. See, this is the power of lookup columns in Dataverse, because remember, it went and built that relationship, the relationship that I just showed you. And because the relationships are there, I can go and grab all that other information from these other tables. All right, so now we're going to switch gears, right? We're going to now go take a look at it from a SharePoint perspective and how that works on SharePoint. So I'm going to go over to my SharePoint site now. And in my SharePoint site, I'll go to Site Contents. And you will see that there is some kind of replication almost, like the same process. And here's what I mean. I go to my manufacturers list, and my manufacturers list, I just have basic list, all right? I got the title and I've got the URL. But I can prove that to you by going into the list settings. And in my list settings, you can see the column types that I have. The title is the title of the manufacturers, and everything else, single line of text, all right? No lookups happening because this is the primary one. By the way, I did a full detailed video on how to build relationships. It's like almost a 4-part series. If you're interested in that, I put that in the link below. It's actually one of my highest view videos. If you're interested, go see that over there. All right, let's come back to this. So we did the manufacturers one, MFR. Let's go and see the devices. And again, you will see some similarities because there is that similarities between the two data sources, except for the formula piece. So I'm going to go in now to look at the device, and the device, again, you can start noticing a few things. I've got a lookup that's happening for the manufacturer. But here is where the power of SharePoint happens. This over here is a lookup column, and I can do that because if I hover my mouse over it, I can click on it and it takes me directly to that item. That's just how SharePoint behaves. And this is the exact same list that we looked at. That's where the lookup is happening. So I'm going to come back to my devices, and just to verify, we'll go to the settings, we'll go to take a list settings, and in the back end, you will see that everything is almost the same except for the manufacturer. That is the type lookup. All of them, other columns just match what the other information which is doing. So see the similarity I did? I kind of replicated this from what I did in Dataverse table, but you will now see how there's some differences happening. So the next thing we got to do is we got to come over here and we got to build that request table. So I'm going to come back, my request list. So I'm going to come back and I'll go ahead and call that as request. And in my request, I'll create, and in here, I'll go ahead and replicate some of that titles that I have. The columns that I have. So I'm going to go back to my list settings, and my settings, go to the list settings, and in my list settings, I want to go and do two things. I go and get the lookup for the manufacturer, and I'll go and get the lookup for the devices, just like what we did in the Dataverse side. So I'll go to my create, and in my create, I'll go ahead and type in MFR, which is MFR, and then I'll go and do a lookup, and in my lookup, I'll go ahead and get the lookup from the manufacturer, which is right here. I'll select the manufacturer, and in this column, I'll go and change that to title, all right? Because that's where the actual data is coming. All the manufacturers coming from the title, and everything is good. So I'll go ahead and close it. Going to do the exact same thing on the devices, but over there, I'll leverage something that SharePoint provides out of the box. So I'll come back to my create column, and in my create column, I'll call this one as device. Device is going to be a lookup, and in my lookup, I got to go ahead and make sure that I also have the title, which is there, the devices. It's coming from the devices and it's got the title, but I want to go and select a few other things. I want to go and get the device name, the device type, price, processor, memory. Basically, I can go and grab all of these if I want. But that's the power of lookup, because even though I'm only going to reference the device, SharePoint can go and pull all these other things because it built that relationship. So it actually makes it a little easier for us to go ahead and add that other items to the gallery, which I'll show you in a minute. So we've gone ahead and done all of these things, and it's working out really well. So we got to now go back into our Power Apps and just add that other functionality there. So I'll go now into my Power Apps, and I'll go and back to my design. And here's the first difference that you notice over there. Dataverse was smart enough because I went and only did the requests, and it went and grabbed the other two. SharePoint is not that way. So I got to go grab the data sources, and I'll connect to all three of them. So I go over here and I'll go to my data sources. I'll click on add, I'll click on connectors, click on SharePoint. I got to search for SharePoint, and I'll search, got it. Click on that connection, and then I got to make sure that I go and get my site, and I go and get those three lists. So my site is the Power Apps Champions, and now I'll go and get my MFR, manufacturers, device, and request. So now I've gone and made the connection. Cool. So I'll just go and now do the same thing I did before, is I'll go ahead and duplicate this one. I'll go ahead and rename that one to SharePoint screen. Got that. I don't need these icons. Delete, delete. This screen, I'll change that name to SharePoint screen, and we'll keep moving forward. Cool. Here, same thing. I'm going to go grab this, and I'm going to go ahead and get a gallery. And in that gallery, I'll connect that gallery to the request, and also change this a little bit because all I'll have is basically some text. I don't have any images coming in. And so we are kind of making some progress over here. Same thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and click on forms. I'm going to click on edit forms. I'll move this a little bit to the right because SharePoint does behave a little bit different. And watch this. If I come now to the data source and I'm going to select my request, moment I do that, it will go ahead and pull all the fields in over here. It just tends to do that for SharePoint. Remember, in the Dataverse, it didn't do that. For SharePoint, it went and pulled all of this in. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of maintain some consistency. All I want is just these three ones, because remember, those are the only three controls we did for the Dataverse. I'll do the exact same thing. So I'll come now to the edit fields, keep those three, and I'll just go and remove the other ones. So I'll remove it, and here I am to the last one, which is attachments. I'll remove it, and I'll change the column types to 1. And so now it becomes very similar to what we saw before. All I got to do is come and insert and drop a button, and we are now moving forward. So here we're going to replicate the same thing what we did on the on the Dataverse side. I want to actually first show you how the data appeared though. So I'll first click on this the form, and I'll go and do the item, and I'll type in the defaults. Defaults is going to be, this guy is called request. So it is called request. The requests, the plural was the Dataverse. So you just got to be a little mindful, and I'll go ahead and put that in. And the best way to test it is come up over here and we see it. So the manufacturers, this is working. Now in SharePoint, it just worked out of the box. Dataverse, we had to go ahead and actually change some of the settings. This one just worked out of the box. And again, it is searchable, which is a beautiful feature of using this type of built-in data edit forms, all right? Just keep that in mind. Inside the edit forms, when you use a lookup, you get this search functionality automatically over there. That should entice you to kind of stick with the edit forms in these type of scenarios. In the devices, again, I didn't have to go ahead and change anything in the advanced sections. It already went ahead and showed me all the devices. But again, it's showing me all of them. We got to replicate that same process, which I'm going to go ahead and show you with that formula now. So I'm going to come out over here, and what I'll do is I'll also go ahead and grab the label. So I'm going to drop this one label. That way you can actually see how we're going to go ahead and leverage that same global variable using that set function. And because there's no way I'm going to be at both the screens at the same time as a single user, that's when I'm going to now go ahead and leverage that same formula. So what I meant was when I come onto this MFR, on its change, I'll use that same set function for that same variable. That way I'll just type in var, IntelliSense tells me what the full variable name is. I'll do that var, and then here I got to go and get that entire variable name, the data card name. So a couple of things, what the trick I do is I always come to the data card, I double click on it, I do a Control C. That way I don't have to guess what it is. I don't have any typos, because sometimes data card numbers are almost the same. You'll have a data card value 6, 7, 8. You don't want to make that mistake, which is why I double click on it and I just do a Control C. I'll share that little tidbit with you. All right, so did that, and I go to the selected one, selected.id. And okay, I intentionally showed you how to do it this way because I've also seen people do it this way. You could still use the self. Self is what we used in Dataverse. So I'm kind of showing you both the ideas. All right, so did that. And when I'll come back to my label over here, I'm going to pull that one a little down, and I'll put that as varMFR. Let's test it. So if I come in, I'll search for that. It populated, came in, pick something else. It populated because the change is happening. I mean, the variable is being set on change. So we are golden. Now what we got to do is come back and just, finish this piece up. So I do, just like within Dataverse, over here as well, I have to go to my advanced and I do have to unlock it. And same process we're going to do is come back over here. I'm going to go and filter it, but I will copy it. Do a Control C, Shift, Enter, and we're going to start writing the same type of formula. There's just a little bit of subtle changes, all right? But overall, the formula is still a filter formula. So watch this. In here, I can do a comma, and I can just put in value. It works for SharePoint. It doesn't work for the Dataverse. It works for the SharePoint. And watch this. I'm going to start typing in value right here. And when I click on it, it automatically will actually, depending on how we clicked on it, sometimes it will go ahead and even open up another bracket, an open parenthesis bracket. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a space and say value in, and IntelliSense is giving me, are you saying in or exact in? I'm saying in. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to click on tab, in, and then I'll do the filter. And this part is the exact same as what we did in Dataverse. Because I want to do the filter in device. Remember, device is the SharePoint one. Devices was the Dataverse one. So I go to device, comma, MFR, MFR, and that's the MFR, dot, and get its value. I don't want to get its ID. Now, the reason I have to do is MFR.Value because MFR was the lookup column in that SharePoint list. That's why I've got to get the value. And the value equals whatever was the variable at that time. And I go and close that, dot, and the actual name of it. Because after I've done the filtering, I got to tell you, hey, I've done the filtering, but what is it that you actually want? Well, I just want the name of the device, that's all. And that's why after I hit the dot, it tells me, okay, what do you want? I said, I'm just going to go ahead and grab the name. So I'll grab the name, and now I'll go and close it. No squiggly lines, but the ultimate test is to actually go and see if it works. So I'll go to Asus, or it's Asus, and that looks a lot like Asus. But just to be sure, if I go into Microsoft, there you go, it's working, and it's working really well. So let's go and replicate the same last piece we had, which was on the form, is to go and go to the title, unlock it. I'll put its default as the user. dot, what was what? I think we used email address or name. We'll go with the full name. And now, and that way it should populate that. I'll go with Microsoft. I can go and do with this one, submit that. And I think the false was my mistake over there. Oh, but you know what? The submit, let's actually fix that. It's not that and, it's just a single and. That's why it didn't work. So we'll go ahead and leave that as is. That worked over there. I just fixed a mistake which I did in the other one, but now you know the correct way to do it. If you really want to make it look nice, you could go ahead and put it in a concatenate and put some spaces, but I'm going to leave that for another video. But in the button itself, all I got to do is hit submit, submit form. Just make sure I get the correct one. That's form number 2. Close it. And if I go and do save, the button, it comes up right over here. But here we can continue to do that same magic. Now watch what happens. In the list, it automatically did it. And I'll show you. Here's the list that we created, all right? In the form, we just filled these 3 things. But because we were able to go in the lookup column, we actually selected all of those other checkboxes. Watch this. If I go and refresh this, all of these other things automatically got pulled in. Remember, we didn't select that in the form. The lookup column went and did this. So that's the power of lookup columns from a SharePoint side as well. And you can see that both of them have their own, positive swing to all of these things. Because in the Dataverse, it built a relationship automatically. So if I wanted to do the lookup, I had to just go into device, dot, and then I can get manufacturer. I can go and get photo, memory, whatnot. Over here, I didn't even have to do any of that. It just goes ahead and does the lookup. But if I want to look at it from inside the app, then it's a very simple thing that I do directly from the Dataverse. So watch, I'm going to go and grab this one, Control C, Control V, and I'll move it down. And this one in its device, I can do dot this item. I can do dot this item. And now, instead of the device one, I want to go ahead and get the device type. So I click on the device type, I click on dot, and then I want to get the value. And you can see it pulled it from the lookup column. Just the lookup column looks a little different. It's device, device type. That's how the lookup column naming convention comes directly inside the formula. And then any other lookups that you went ahead and selected, remember the checkboxes we selected when we were creating the column? If you've got those selected, whichever ones you selected, they will show up over here. So for example, I think we went ahead and got the price. So if I go and now search for the device type memory price, if I click on device type price, I go to dot, I go and get the value, it shows up over here. The price also shows up. Do you see the power of how this is working? The magic of lookup columns. And in our case, we did a double lookup. And finally, in the SharePoint list as well, just as a call out. Now, since it's the SharePoint list, it always goes on the first way. So if I, in the first term, so for example, I want to search for Sony. If I type in ON, doesn't work. But if I go and type in SO, well, that works. Because again, SharePoint list, when you do its search, it doesn't actually do a search. It does a filter starting from the first name. That's the only difference, but still very powerful. So hopefully you found this deep dive in Lookup helpful. We looked at both the SharePoint list and the Dataverse tables, and I showed you the differences as well as the power of both of them. And as a quick recap, in the SharePoint, when we did the lookup, right there, you can actually go and say which of those columns you want to see in the list view. In the Dataverse, you just go ahead and look up whatever is the table you're going to reference, which is, for example, devices, we reference the manufacturer, but then it automatically set up the relationship. And then in the gallery, we were able to just go and call all the information. That's the power of lookups in both Dataverse and SharePoint. And then in your galleries, you can go ahead and add whatever information you want. So hopefully this was helpful. And as always, keep using Power Apps. Hey everyone, hopefully you found this video useful. And if you did, can you help me help you? Can you subscribe to this YouTube channel? Because remember, I provide fresh content on a weekly basis and it's 100% free. So if you have subscribed, thank you so much and pass the word. But if you haven't, subscribe, click on the bell notification and let the learning begin.